Years ago, I watched my mother lose her job after developing severe carpal tunnel syndrome from years of repetitive data entry work. She had surgery, took time off to recover, and when she came back, she was later let go. That moment really stayed with me. It showed me how much hidden friction can live inside everyday business processes, and how fragile things become when too much depends on manual work or a single person. That experience eventually led me to build Connex, a platform designed to automate e-commerce accounting and eliminate operational friction behind the scenes. But as we work with growing companies, especially in the $2 to $20 million range, we've seen a different kind of bottleneck. Not just systems, the founder becomes the system. They're involved in marketing decisions. They approve campaigns. They jump in to fix messaging. They're often the one driving revenue, directly or indirectly. And while this works early on, it does not scale. Revenue becomes inconsistent. Growth slows down, and the business can't run without them. That's why I'm excited to welcome today's guest. Michael Buzinski is a marketing strategist and author of Rule of 26, a framework designed to help service-based businesses and increasingly e-commerce SaaS companies build predictable, scalable revenue engines that don't rely on the founder being involved in every decision. Today, we're talking about how to build a founder-free revenue engine so your business can grow consistently without depending on you to make every move. Buzz, can you start by sharing your background and what led you to focus on helping companies build scalable revenue systems?
That is a big question. So I started my business in 2005 as a media production house, and it quickly became a multi-million-dollar creative agency. And we were always situated in the small to medium-sized business sector. And I'd probably say 90% of the 1,200 plus clients I've served over the last 21 years have all been founder-led. And so over the years, as we transitioned away from media production heavy space and in more into the strategic realm, and now exclusively in the strategic and fractional leadership space, we have seen exactly what you have just described. Over and over again, the founder builds systems around them, and we have to get them out of that. Otherwise, they will either burn out, or when they go to exit, they will be still tied to that business because it's unvaluable. I tell people all the time, a useful founder owns a useless company, both to the market and to its employees. Because if the founder is the person who everybody's got to go get permission or guidance from, then when they walk out the door, productivity drops, which means profitability drops and growth stalls.
Yeah, I agree. There are a lot of companies that are founder-led where the profitability and the revenue drops. You wrote the book, The Rule of 26. For those of you who aren't familiar, what is the Rule of 26 and how does it work in simple terms?
So the Rule of 26 is very simple. It states that if you increase your website traffic, your website conversion rate, and your average revenue per client coming from your website by 26% each, you will double your revenue. And I wrote that book to simplify the business intelligence side of things, because Founder, they're not accountants, they're not statisticians, and we have a lot of people who feed a lot of key performance indicators or KPIs down their throat to make themselves look good. And I'm like, well, wait a second. Founders don't care about how many likes you have or any of the other vanity metrics that are in marketing to make marketing agencies look good. They care about revenue. And so I boiled down roughly 168 KPIs that folks like HubSpot and Shopify and Google all utilize in their reporting platforms, and boiled them down to the top 3 KPIs that affect revenue. Without traffic, we have no revenue. Without conversion, we have no revenue. And we can scale when we increase revenue per client.
Exactly. You said you can scale when you increase the revenue per client and you have fewer clients paying more money. If you had to explain the Rule of 26 to a founder in 30 seconds, how would you describe it? Or 26 seconds?
26 seconds. Well, I know it comes right back to the rule. It's one of those things where if they are caught in the I don't know what to do, we just have to look at those 3 KPIs and understand, do we have a value problem? Do we have a conversion problem, or do we have a traffic problem or a visibility problem? And when you can bring it down to 3 pieces of information to look at, your decision-making becomes a lot clearer. And you're not chasing these ghost and vanity metrics or chasing down tactics that have nothing to do with one of those three revenue impacting KPIs.
And why is this framework especially relevant for e-commerce and SaaS companies in the $2 to $20 million range?
Well, we get both e-com and SaaS are saturated with metrics. You and I would agree with that, right? Like, we see so many. I just talked about the 168 that HubSpot touts that they can track. There's 128 that Shopify by itself can track, right? And those are not just the only ones out there. There's other platforms that talk about other things. You know, when you're talking about answer engine optimization or SEO or any of those, they all have, every type of strategy and tactic have another set of KPIs we can be tracking. And so when you have all that noise, how do you make any decisions? But if you can get your leadership around you to talk to you in one of those three languages, a traffic language, a conversion language, or a revenue value, basically client value language, you now have gotten rid of all the other stuff. Because if they can't talk to one of those three things, they're probably not as valuable as they think they are.
It's all about pipeline revenue and profitability, not about views, and attention does not equal pipeline.
Those are precursors. And those are very important to the marketers. Those are very important to the lead generation agencies. Those are very important to the sales staff. It's very important to the client success team. But to the owner, if those people can't translate that into lifetime value, increased lifetime value, increased conversions, or increased traffic, it's not worth their time to talk about it. As an owner, you have too many things to think about. And so when your revenue engine has all these moving parts, your leadership should be able to come to you and say, here are the three numbers you care about. And this is what we've done with each of those three. Then they can work with their teams to deal with all the other minutia that is driving their day-to-day actions.
And you talk a lot about businesses being overly dependent on the founder. What does that typically look like in real life?
It's the easiest question to ask yourself if whether or not your company is too dependent on you is one question. If you walked away from your business for 30 days and nobody could talk to you, what would break? How many things would break? And how hard would they break? Would your key clients start questioning whether or not they are in the right place? Would your pipeline start to wither because your network is what drives the pipeline? Would big deals not close while you were gone because you are the best closer in your whole entire company? These are three of many symptoms that happens when founders leave the room for any extended amount of time.
And speaking of leaving the room, at what stage do founders usually become the bottleneck to their own growth?
We normally see it anywhere between 1 and 3 million is usually on the service-based side. On the product side and the SaaS side, it really depends on how much service is behind the actual product or software, right? So I've seen some that can get up to 15, 20 million. And then all of a sudden it's like, it's just too much, right? Because they're working on big deals and stuff like that. And so to grow any further, they got to bring that founder back in because their strategic partnerships and key deals that they want to get, especially if you're trying to target enterprise or large corporations. But mostly we see between 2 and 10 million. There is that you're going to see it really fast.
And like you said, that sometimes the founder is the bottleneck. What are the clearest warning signs that revenue depends on too much on the founder?
I go back to the 30-day thermometer, right? Try a week. How often are you, as the founder, getting texts during the day for decisions that you actually you might even have documented somewhere? It all comes down to how many questions are you answering in the day-to-day operations or the day-to-day revenue ops, either way, right? Because dependency can be in the revenue side. It could be on the operations side. Just depends on what type of a founder you are. Sometimes it's both, right? Are you the account manager and the salesperson? But what we normally see, the symptoms is just talking to the managers and ask them, what type of autonomy do you have? How often are you asking the founder questions or permission? If it's more than once a week, you might have a problem, because if you were gone for, say, 4 weeks, because that's the litmus test for us. If you're not founder free, if you can't leave your business to run for it by itself for at least a month. And the reason we say a month, what if you get sick? What if you have to go to the hospital, right? If you're seriously injured, 4 weeks is nothing. That's just to get back up on your feet. You're not 100%. If you're in a big car accident, maybe, get injured on a hike or something like that. All of these things compound those symptoms that you're asking about.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's hard for the founders to step away from a lot of their businesses. Many founders feel like they need to stay involved in marketing to keep quality high. Why does this mindset actually slow growth over time?
There is a heroics mindset that gets built into being a founder. When people come to you as a founder for guidance or permission, there's an immediate dopamine hit that comes with that, because you get to solve a problem. And men have this worse than women, but it happens regardless. And so when you are starting to step away from being the main gear in your rev ops, you stop getting that dopamine hit. And if you haven't prepared your mindset to change what your role is in your company, you will go find things to break in your business and you won't even know it. But you'll start digging around and start breaking things, because then you get to fix it and you get that dopamine hit. But what we want to see is a shift to strategic thinking. Your eyes should be on the horizon, not down in the ditches, right? In the day-to-day on the field, right? And that means that when we're looking at the horizon, we're never actually meeting the horizon. The horizon is a moving target. So that means that our dopamine hits come over long spans of time, and we have to find a way to shift that need for the immediate dopamine hit to something that a little bit more of a deferred gratification.
Yeah, I agree with the dopamine hits. I'm sure a lot of founders definitely feel that way. What is the most common mistakes companies make when trying to build a repeatable revenue engine?
Well, the first thing is that they don't build systems without them, because they're so used to building systems around them. And that right there is good for growth up to a point, but never for scale and never for a founder-free situation. So some people love being operators, right? And so that's what they build. They build an operator-centric system. But if you're trying to do things beyond your company, right, actually have entrepreneur freedom, you've got to get out of the way. Another thing is that they don't hire smart enough people. You ever heard the saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room?
Yeah, I've heard that saying.
If you're the smartest person in your company, you haven't built a good enough company. Great leaders create awesome leaders, and awesome leaders don't need their boss. And so if your leaders still require you, they can't create the automation that you're asking for. They can't create the repeatable outcomes that you want for your company, because they have to stop to either get permission, clarification, or direction. Without them being completely autonomous and smarter than you. So you're actually going to your people going, well, what do you think? If they can't answer that question, even if it is, I don't know, but let me find out for you, those are the people you want. Those are the right people on the bus. You get those people on the bus, you can take that company anywhere you want, and you'll do it with entrepreneurial freedom. And that's what you want. If you can't get to that point, how profitable of a life are you really leading?
Exactly. If you're in the company all the time, how profitable is your life? How should e-commerce and SaaS companies think about aligning marketing, sales, and operations so revenue becomes more consistent?
You have to think of your revenue engine as one entity. How often are you working with clients that they're like, well, marketing says this and sales says this and client success says this, right? And sometimes you're looking at the same KPIs and everybody's pointing at the other person going, well, that's their fault and that's their fault. That right there is not a revenue engine. Those are 3 siloed motors running on their own. If we can integrate the gears of all 3 arcs of the revenue engine, of the client lifecycle, in that we are actually pointing to the same success, now we create what I call a honeycomb flywheel. Because there's 6 stages to the client lifecycle. We won't go too far into that, but each of your arcs within your engine, your marketing, your sales, and your client success, are responsible for 2 of each of those stages. and they feed each other, just like marketing feeds sales, and sales feeds client success, and client success should be feeding back into creating that feedback loop. That's why we call it a flywheel, back into marketing. So until you can get the team huddled around the same KPIs, so like with the rule of 26, you've got traffic, conversions, and client lifetime value, or client lifetime value, or average revenue per client, right? Either one. Okay. If you guys can all come together and say, this is how we're going to do it as a team, that is a company that's going somewhere.
For a $2 to $20 million company that wants to reduce founder dependency and have everybody working as a team, what's the first practical step they should take?
You have to be able to diagnose your business objectively. And this takes a lot of self-awareness on the founder side and a lot of humility on your leader side, right? Because nobody wants to say, well, I could be doing better. They don't want to tell their boss that, especially when it's the founder, right? How often like, yeah, boss, I'm the one, I'm dragging it down. Nobody wants to do that, right? They don't want it to admit that they're doing less than, right? And so this is a hard thing to do by yourself. So getting a diagnostic of your company from a third party is one of the best things you can do as a leader, because now you can get a look from the outside in, because we can't read the label from inside the bottle. Right? And so if we can get that diagnostic, get a SWOT analysis that says, hey, this is where we're really strong, but this is also where we're really weak. And these are your opportunities. And here's some threats we got to worry about. And here's some trends we could be going towards. If you have that laid out for you, how many ideas as a team can start looking at like where the first steps are? Obviously we're going to look at our weaknesses and say, how can we eradicate those weaknesses and lean into our strengths? And then once we have that and we have that good foundation, how can we now leverage the opportunities that are in front of us and avert the threats? But it all starts with that diagnostic, so you understand where you are right here, right now, and then get those first steps towards success.
Buzz, this has been a very interesting meeting, especially as a business founder myself. And I want to thank you for breaking down something that so many founders experience, but don't always recognize. One of the biggest takeaways from today is that growth doesn't just depend on better tactics. It depends on building systems that can operate without constant founder involvement. When revenue relies too heavily on one person, it becomes fragile. When you create a repeatable, structured engine, growth becomes more predictable and more scalable. For founders in the $2 to $20 million stage, this is often the shift that allows businesses to move from working because of you to working without you. If you'd like to learn more about Buzz and his work, you can connect with him on LinkedIn or check out his book, Rule of 26, where he breaks down how to build a scalable revenue system step by step. And if you're scaling across multiple channels and struggling with fragmented data or manual processes, visit ConnexEcommerce.com to see how automation can support that growth with better visibility and control. If you found this episode valuable, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a founder who feels they're too involved in their own revenue engine. Thanks, Buzz.
Thank you.